Welcome to Indie Beacon Radio, where creative souls can find help in marketing their creations. You can send questions for each show on Twitter using the hashtag IndieBeacon. Now sit back and enjoy learning about our guest for this show.
Good evening, everyone. This is awarded author and, more importantly, your radio host, Channeline Charbonneau, this evening, speaking to a very unique author. I've been very excited to do this one. I'm so happy we're here. We've got Jim Ziegler here. Hi, Jim. How are you, dear?
Doing pretty good.
Wonderful. So this is your first book, correct?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. It is called The Call, Faithful Endeavors. I actually have my own juicy copy here. This is a very interesting story that I think gives a uniqueness to what Jim has done. One of the things that he has done is that he has started to write about women's fiction. I don't know if I want to call it salacious, but I think there's things that go with women's fiction that make it very interesting, that attract women and men for its purposes. So, why did you pick this genre? Why was this so important to you, Jim?
Well, I can't say that I actually picked the genre. It kind of picked me. This whole story really evolved out of a phone call that I made when I was 9 years old. And over the years, I remember it and just sort of put it out of my mind. But a few years ago, it came back, and then this whole story just exploded in my mind, if you will. And as I was writing it, I knew it was an unusual story. I wasn't even sure what the genre was as I started writing. In fact, most of the way through, I kept wondering, what really is the genre for this book? The publisher finally decided that it must be women's fiction. So I said, okay, we'll go with that. It's even listed as romance, although it's a bit unfortunate because it really isn't a romance novel. I mean, it has elements of romance in it, but that's really not the purpose for it, and it wasn't my intent. It just sort of happened that way.
So let's give a little 10-second discussion on an elevator of what this book is about and what The Call is about, because it is very enticing. It definitely probably fuels a lot of feelings in a person. And I think mixed with a lot of stuff going on today, there's going to be another layer of thoughts and maybe personal introspection there. So why don't you take the call, because that's really where this book really takes off.
Okay, the book is very emotional, and it all started out again as this phone call that I made when I was 9 years old. It was a very unusual call, very noteworthy one. It's a call I've remembered, well, for almost exactly 50 years now. And it was so startling, so shocking in a way that I've remembered it over the years. And so, again, I never intended to write this book. It just happened one night when I remembered the phone call. And then suddenly it took off. And I just started writing. I started thinking about the story about a week and a half until I started to say, okay, I'm going to write a book. I have enough material. But the story is basically the story of persistence and redemption. It's not really romance, although there is romance in it, but it's really intended to convey a message, or several messages about persistence and how persistence can pay off in a positive way.
So do you want to let a little out about this actual call that happened to you?
Yeah, let me tell you a little bit. So then I put this into the book. I was at a sleepover, a friend's house. I call him a friend. He was an acquaintance and something of a friend in the neighborhood. He was one of the, shall we say, not one of the good kids in the neighborhood. So I was at his house, and he suggested we make this phone call. Now, I won't go into the content of the phone call, but it was intriguing. It was basically a prank phone call. He dialed the number and had me talk. The call itself was, again, pretty disturbing, if you will. And what was so remarkable about it was not so much what I said, but the response I got from the girl that I called. And that is really what makes this entire story possible. It's, if you ignore that, if you don't pay attention to the tone of the response that I got, you would look at this story and say, okay, this is pretty unusual, kind of implausible. But then if you consider the response was not anger or irritation or disgust, it was ecstasy and unbridled joy. I can still remember the tone of that response. 50 years later, I can still remember the joy. And it wasn't a forced response. It was a genuine joy at the opportunity. And that is what makes this so remarkable and what made me remember. And if you recall that and think about that as you read the book, then the story takes on a completely different tone. And I want to add as well, there's a difference between the book and the story. The book is just this first book. The story actually continues into 2 more books that I'm working on. So, again, this call is really the most remarkable part of this whole thing and the basis for the entire story.
So you're an author now. And you're a new author. So can you talk a little bit about what you do or what you did before you wrote this book and how that background, how do you go from your background to being an author?
Well, the first thing to say is I've wanted to be an author since I was about 10 years old. But it wasn't going to work out quite the way I wanted. I come from a family of scientists. My dad was a professor of chemistry at the university. He was a German scientist, right down to the bubbling liquids in the laboratory. And he basically told us, without saying so much, but it was pretty well understood, we were all expected to go on to college and eventually get a PhD, which my brothers and sister and I did. And going into the liberal arts, becoming an English major or something of that sort, just wasn't allowed. He never said that we couldn't do that, but it was pretty clear. And even the fact when I told him I wanted to be an engineer, he was not too thrilled, but he accepted it once I went into graduate school. So I am actually, I have a PhD in biomedical engineering. I'm a licensed professional engineer. And I'm the director of software development for a small medical image analysis company. So of course that qualifies me to write women's fiction, right? Well, no, it doesn't. I have wanted to write, again, since I was 10 years old, but I never had the opportunity. And several years ago, I had pretty much given up the idea of ever becoming a writer. It just wasn't going to happen, I thought, until this book came along. And I just remember the phone call. And all of a sudden, it's like I was on speed. I could not stop thinking about it. Every waking moment, for a week and a half, I kept thinking about it, and there was narrative and dialogue and story that just kept going on and on and on. I could barely work. And then I said, no, I have enough material here that I could write a book. And I'd always wanted to. So I said, I'm going to do it. I had no idea what to do. My son had just finished reading To Kill a Mockingbird for school. So he had it home, and I started flipping through it, and I said, well, okay, they got this many pages or so many lines on a page. Let me format a document and start typing and see where I go. And I did that for a week or so. Then I went online and checked some more stuff, and finally discovered some more information about books, how to do them, what to do initially, how long it should be, that kind of information. And I just fell into it. But then for months, again, it went on for months that I could not stop thinking about this story. And every moment I could, I would sit down on the weekends and the evening. I would just start writing. And I wrote chapters as I felt inspired to write them. Your English teachers all say, start with your outline and then start writing from the first bullet point, and when you're done at the last bullet point, the book's finished. I didn't do that. I just started writing chapters as I felt that I wanted to write them, ideas that I had. And some ideas, there was one point when I had 3 chapters in my head all at the same time, and I couldn't write it down fast enough. So, I just kept plugging away on it until I finally got a first draft done.
So what do you do in your real life, Jim?
So basically, I write software. I'm the director of software development. So I architect the software, I design it, and since we're a small company and I'm just about the only developer there, I've written almost all the software myself.
Wow, that's amazing to go from a software formulated brain to creatively crunching 3 chapters in one sitting is, it's a dual brained phenomenon. I can definitely say so.
Or a psychotic phenomenon.
There you go. Well, wonderful. Well, we want to continue this wonderful psychedelic conversation with Jim Ziegler, author of The Call, Faithful Endeavors. We will be back.
Tom Gromes, father of market intelligence, writing business books that are a game changer. International author of nonfiction, has written the first and only books on the collapse of Russia and the first and only book on market intelligence. Check them out at mkintel.org. That's mkintel.org, mkintel.org.
Love to read? Love to meet authors in person? Then check out bookfestival.network to find a book festival in your region of Texas. We are adding book festival events throughout the year, so sign up to get notices and even a coupon towards purchase of a Texas author's book. Sign up at bookfestival.network.
What would you do if you had to put your life on hold to parent your parents? You have to laugh to keep from crying. How to Parent Your Parents is a must-read book full of antidotes and practical advice to help parenting your parents. Author Charlotte Canyon provides insights to help prepare anyone facing the challenges of caring for elderly parents. Check out our website at www.howtoparentyourparents.net.
Welcome back to Indie Beacon Radio. Don't forget to like us, follow us, or subscribe to one of our many channels. Now, here is your host for today's show.
Good evening, y'all. This is speaker, model, awarded children's author, but more importantly, your radio host for this evening. We are speaking to the very talented Jim Ziegler. He is a new author. His first book called The Call, Faithful Endeavors. Welcome back, Jim.
Hello.
So, we talk about this psychedelic trip, right? And this book and The Call, and, women's fiction obviously are very entertaining, but I think what makes this book different is it's more of personal growth. And I don't think it's a templated growth. I think each and every person reads it differently and feels different things and reacts in a different way. Can you talk a little bit about why that is with your book, why your book is so unique to go from fiction to growing yourself?
Well, part of it, I think you have to realize that the first chapter of this book, the events that I discussed, the childhood events, are all true. So it kind of gives you an indication of my life when I was young and the way I perceived the world. After that phone call, the rest of the book is fiction, but it's not as much entertainment as personal growth, because I intend for the reader to gain something from this novel. it's not really intended just to be a nice read and say, well, that was fun, and let me go on to the next book. I want people to think. I want people to think differently. This is a goal I've had, most of my life. In fact, my goal, I've told many people over the years, is to improve the quality of life. Every job I've had, it's not been a paycheck. It's been a vocation. I want to make the world a better place. And this book is also part of that. I want people to realize that persistence will pay off. Persistence in caring for others actually does benefit all of us. In fact, in the end, the ultimate message will be to that effect, is that to really persist and do things that are of benefit will help everyone. And that's really what I'm looking for. This is what I want people to get out of this book. If they're entertained by it, that's wonderful. But if they're changed by it, that's really my goal here.
Wow, that's a great message. And I've done enough of these interviews that you're the first to say something like that. So wow, kudos to you to have a great mission, because there's plenty out there that do a lot of other things, if you know. So you hint in your book that it might not be a complete story. So are you considering to go on with this story? Is there something you can tell us about the story that may tie in and lead to the other continuation of other books?
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit about the next two books in the series. So this is The Call, Faithful Endeavors. The next one is The Call, Elusive Peace. And the last one will be The Call, A Certain Gift. And they tie in that this book is basically told from the perspective of one of the main characters, a boy named Ken Scrivener. The second book will be many of the same points, but told from the perspective of the other main character. It'll also fill in a number of gaps. In this book, there are, there's a long period of time when you don't know anything about the other main character, a girl named Jenny. And the second book will give you an indication of what happened to her. In fact, we'll go into detail of what happened to her in the intervening years and why did she suffer so greatly? What is it that happened to her? The third book will introduce a number of new characters, and we'll take the story in a slightly different direction, but we'll extend it. And then in the end, you'll finally understand how the phone call ties into everything. And really, not so much the phone call, but the response of the two main characters in this first book to that phone call, how it changed their lives and the effect that had on the lives of other people. So it is a continuation of the story and a final analysis of the purpose for all of this.
Do you think, a lot of things affect us through our experiences and through life. Do you think that maybe that's part, as you see this character grow, maybe in some ways good, maybe in some ways bad, and do you think that maybe that's the way that you have personal growth in yourself? Maybe do you attach a certain situation? Is that how this works?
Yeah, I would say so. It's the sum total of our experiences for sure. But as I've told many people, you really can't understand something until you have experienced it. So you experience it, you begin to understand, and that's how growth begins and how growth progresses. But you have to allow it to affect you. I mean, there's the famous quote by Thane Pittman, "I'll see it when I believe it." When you accept that change can happen, when you accept that there is more to this world than you can understand or explain, then you will begin to see the effect. You'll see growth in yourself and in others, and you will allow it to happen. That's one of the messages I want people to get from this story, is that allowing growth to happen is the first step. knowing what you have to do to grow as a person can be very complicated. You can spend your entire life trying to figure it out. But the first thing is to accept that it must happen and allow it to happen, and not to hinder it as it does.
So how did you, change is one of the most powerful instruments to make somebody's life maybe happier or more fulfilled or more challenged. Or, I mean, you could go on with all sorts of, adjectives. So why do you believe you learned this lesson? Because I'm with you. Half the battle is knowing you have to change, or accepting change, or understanding that change can occur. Why do you think, what's in your life that made you realize this and accept it?
That's a good question. One thing I will tell you I learned many years ago too is that fear of the unknown is more powerful than fear of the familiar pain. A lot of people will put up with the pain that they have because they know it. And they're not willing to go into the unknown and allow themselves to change. But I've learned over the years that change will happen to you whether you want it to or not. And the more you embrace it, the more it will work for you. That's the one thing I learned as an engineer. You have a certain state that something may have, but then you can also look at its change. How is it changing from one state to the next? And that in itself can be significant. So you can look at it not just as where am I today, but where am I going? How did I get here today? What brought me to this point? And when you do that, you start to understand more about where you are. And so the change actually, embracing the change helps you to understand your current state and where to move from that point. And so how did it happen to me? I'm still trying to figure that out.
Wow. Well, let's take a break, Jim. I really think the viewers and even myself, I want to digest that a little bit more. That was very valuable. Thank you for that. So we will be back with talented author Jim Ziegler right after these messages.
What would you do if you found out everyone on the town council were thieves and murderers? That's what happened in Bandera, Texas in 1873. John Cruder was the marshal, yet he needed to operate outside the law in order to balance the scales of justice. He is the Midnight Marauder. You can find his books on Amazon.com and TopWesterns.com in paperback, digital, and audio. I'm Roy Clinton, and I hope you'll read The Midnight Marauder.
Indie Lector is a store for serious readers and indie authors. Find great talent at indielector.store and save money on books with their book club. A portion of the proceeds helps get books into schools and libraries in need. Find a great book to read by an indie author at indielector.store.
Hi, Brakefield and Berkey here, award-winning authors for the Techno Thrillers books, the Enigma book series. Technology, today's weapon of choice, the cyber good guys versus the cyber bad guys.
We invite you to join our website, theenigmaseries.com, where you will get sample chapters, sample audibles, book trailers, and you can sign up for our mailing list. The books are available in ebook, paperback, and Audible. Thank you.
Welcome back to Indie Beacon Radio. Don't forget to like us, follow us, or subscribe to one of our many channels. Now, here is your host for today's show.
Good evening, y'all. This is Shenley Charbonneau, your radio host this evening, speaking to the author Jim Ziegler. We just got off with you discussing how important change is in his first book, The Call, Faithful Endeavors. Welcome back, Jim.
Hello again.
Yeah, so man, amazing thought process about change and how to embrace it. And it's almost like you're taking a logical approach, which maybe that's what it takes to realize where you arrive in life and how you do that as much as you possibly can, right? But
Sure.
this book, I bet that comes through really strong with this book. And where can these people purchase your book, dear?
They can get the book on Amazon, and Barnes & Noble also has it. You can buy the paperback, and they also have the electronic version.
So what made you want to become an author for so very long? What do you think changed in your life recently? What made it finally okay for Jim to do this?
I have to thank my wife and kids for letting me do this. At first, they thought I was going crazy or something. What's Dad doing? So they allowed me to do this, but I think the fact that I've been in my job for quite a while, I have a position where I have a little bit of flexibility. Not much, I'm busy all the time, but I'm starting to slow down a little bit in all of my external activities, and I thought, it's time just to do this. I felt compelled. It's almost like this story was forced upon me. It's like, you will write this book. It is time to do it, and now you will write it, and here's the story. And that's even why I chose the name Scrivener for the last name for one of the main characters. Because I almost felt like I was transcribing a story that was being given to me. But I didn't want to call him Ken Transcriptions. So I thought Scrivener was a good name, so okay, I'll use that one. It's kind of close. But it was just, I felt like I had the freedom to finally do this at this point.
Wow. So that's wonderful. I just want to thank you, Jim. I'm going to be thinking about this interview for about at least a week on and off. So I really appreciate it. And, congratulations on your first book. That's the toughest one. Just wanted to sign off tonight. This is your radio host, Shanley Charbonneau, speaking with Jim Ziegler, author of The Call, Faithful Endeavors. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you for listening to Indie Beacon Radio, where creative souls can find help in marketing their creations. To learn more about Indie Beacon services, to be a guest on the show, or to advertise on our show, please visit our website at indiebeacon.com.